I hope you can all hear me at the back. You can't hear me. Is that any better? Yes? I think it's switched on. If you can't hear me, just shout out or throw something at me. Probably not a good idea as we're with the HSE, so make sure it's light. You probably want me to talk today about, particularly after Mark's presentation, about, OK, how do I do good leadership? Give me an instruction book. Well, I'm not going to do that, because I can't do that, because you all know your own industries, you all know your own businesses, you all know your own structures and how those businesses work. What I can do, though, is I can give you a couple of bits of advice from my sector, the sector that I represent. So I'm Peter Davidson, I'm the Executive Director of the Tank Storage Association. No, that doesn't mean I store battle tanks in a field, as many people often think I do. Our members store liquids in bulk. What does that mean? Well, if you think about import terminals, distribution terminals, businesses which store large volumes of liquids, which could be acids, it could be any kind of chemical products, for example. But actually 60% of what our members do is hydrocarbons. And they do that in a network of over 300 terminals within the UK. And of those 300 terminals, probably 70 of those are COMAH sites. And a large number of those are critical national infrastructure. So that's why COMAH Strategic Forum and all of the work that we do here is particularly relevant to us and our member companies. But I just wanted to give you a couple of very short slides on what are the key considerations for us in terms of process safety leadership. And I think Mark has already touched on some of these already. There are clear business benefits in managing process safety from the top of an organisation, because failure to manage your risks can hurt your people, the environment and the communities around your site. Not only that, it can damage your reputation immeasurably. Just look at BP as one example of that. And the other thing to say is that incidents cost time and money. When you're talking to your financial directors, do they actually consider the full cost of what an incident actually is? Do you consider everything? Or do you just think about repairing that tank or bit of equipment and replacing the product? It's a hell of a lot more expensive than that, because you need to think about hospitalisation of staff. How much is that going to cost? Bringing in new people. How much is it going to cost to do all of those different things that you need to do? So actually, when you're thinking about the benefits of good process safety and good process safety leadership, please do think about what the actual cost of having an incident is. That isn't just replacing the product and replacing the tank. All of those aspects have a negative impact on your bottom line. So when you're talking to your board, you're talking to your financial directors, they need to understand that any incident or near miss can have a direct impact on your bottom line, what your profit and loss says for that year. That's particularly important to engage them, to get their attention on why it is so important to manage those risks. And you know what, to manage safety within your organisation, that has to come from the top. That has to come from the governor sitting on the board or the UK country head. That has to come there. And that isn't about them just sitting there in their ivory tower and instructing their minions about just make sure that my business runs effectively. That is not what it's about. The board, chief exec, senior management team must, absolutely must, have a clear vision and understanding that your business is running safely. And they must understand what the implications are of the decisions that they're making in that boardroom. They need to understand where we're going to drop 20% from our workforce because we don't need it because we've got a new automation system in. What does that actually mean? What impact is that going to have on process safety? Now, that senior management team and those chief executives shouldn't just be sitting in a boardroom and never going out to their facilities either, because that does not give you, as a chief exec or a member of the senior management team, a good idea about how your business is actually run. One of our member companies who run quite a few large import terminals in the UK, their chief executive goes regularly to all of their sites throughout Europe. They go out and they talk to all of the operators that work in the control rooms, the field operators, all levels within the business. Why does he do that? Because it gives him a good sense of how he is managing risks and how his employees is managing risks within that business. It is so important that you don't just rely on reports coming in, or as somebody mentioned earlier, a nice spreadsheet that comes up with lots of green symbols. That doesn't tell you anything. You have to go out there, you have to engage with the workforce to understand how well your business is performing. Now, clearly your board, your senior management team, they don't need to be process safety experts. You have experts within your business who are process safety experts in the same way that you have EC&I experts and mechanical experts. But you do, as a board member, you do as a member of the senior management team, need to have an understanding of what process safety is and what are the key factors that can affect it. And one of the ways that you can do that is, for example, doing some short training courses to your execs. Do they know what management of change is? Do they know why it's so important? Why don't you do a couple of hour training session for your board to say this is management of change? This is why it's so important, just to raise competency and awareness within the business. And somebody mentioned earlier about the process safety leadership principles. Who here have heard of the PSLG principles? A couple of people, that's good. Does anybody actually interpret, understand them and know how to apply them? Because sometimes actually the language can be quite difficult, can be quite inaccessible. It really depends what sector you come from and what your level of knowledge and engagement is with process safety. I know what they are because I started at a time when we were writing the final report from Buntsfield. But that's not true of every organisation. And I strongly recommend, if you haven't already done so, go onto the COMAH Strategic Forum website and look for two very important documents. One is the paper that you saw a picture of earlier, which is Managing the Risks That Can Destroy Your Business. How many people have downloaded that paper? I can see 2 or 3 people. That is, if you like, a very simple guide to how to interpret and apply the process safety leadership principles of process safety. Please do look at it. It's really, really useful. The other document is something that we published earlier this year as a one-page poster. Who's downloaded the one-page poster about safety leadership? One person. Why hasn't everybody downloaded it? Put it up on the wall. It's one page. Very, very simple language about the key things that your board, your senior management team should be interested in, should be doing. So I really, really do recommend go on there, download those documents. They're incredibly good resources developed by all the people that sit on COMAH Strategic Forum, both the unions, industry themselves and also our regulator. The other thing is, if you haven't done so, is download the Operational Delivery Guide on Leadership that was mentioned earlier. That tells you about all of the things that your intervention visit is going to cover. And in the back, there's a big appendix of all the things that you need to consider, all the things that your senior management team need to consider. The resources are there, the training opportunities are there, so I really do encourage you to do something. Finally, I think Steve Elliott mentioned this earlier. Please also think about using your trade association. How many of you here are engaged with a trade association? Could you put your hands up? And how many of your trade associations are directly involved in process safety and give you guidance and help in those areas? Again, 1 or 2. If they're not doing that, encourage them to do so. And if they're unwilling to do so, if the other members of that trade association are unwilling to do so, then talk to one of us. As Steve has said, one of us will represent your interest and are probably a good fit for your organisation. One of our primary roles in life is making sure that we engage with different businesses to share knowledge, best practice and experience, and we have excellent relationships with the competent authorities, with the unions. We are passionate about that. I hope that's come across in my chat to you. I'm passionate about this. There's a huge amount of resources available. All you need to do is ask and engage. It doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be rocket science. Sorry, Mark, but it doesn't have to be rocket science. A lot of this is honestly just good practice and good understanding. And that's it from me. So I'll hand over to Andrew. Thank you, Andrew.
So next up is Andrew Nixon. Andrew is the Senior Advisor to COMAH